Hello and welcome to this dip into the Planes TV archive. What you're about to view is a replay of a live broadcast. It will play through pretty much in its entirety. There may be the odd glitch and gap in the flying display, but that's how airshows go sometimes. Hopefully still an enjoyable way to spend a few hours of the strange period that we're going through at the moment. And if you do enjoy what you see, we've got lots more of this archive content available at PTV On Demand. That's our subscription service at watch.planestavy.com. If you do enjoy what you're watching here, please go and check that out. There are of course lots of DVDs and Blu-rays available at planestavy.com of all of our previous airshow productions. Without further ado, let's get stuck in with this replay of a live airshow.
One of the very earliest British jet-powered trainer aircraft, and entered service in the 1950s. The first prototype flew in June 1954, making its first flight from the factory at Luton, and then designated the Jet Provost T1. 40 of those were ordered and developed into the T3, very much the standard training aircraft before the Tucano took it over at the likes of Cranwell and Linton in the mid-90s. Powered by an Armstrong Siddeley Viper jet engine, complete with ejector seats and a redesigned airframe. Going inverted now, we've taught you a little bit about that. Not entirely comfortable, a lot of blood rushing to his head there, and he'll be pushing away from him in that case as opposed to pulling, which is what you do when you go around a corner. The T5 itself wasn't developed until the mid-60s, coming complete with a pressurized cockpit, which made obviously the surrounds a lot more comfortable. But it's quite a cozy cockpit. As he goes now in knife edge down to our right-hand side, and the instrument panel is very up, sort of close and personal in your face a little bit. The T5 a little bit more roomier than the T3. And quite a noisy engine, the Viper, for what it actually does. Most people say variable noise, constant speed, and that being a relatively low constant speed. But even so, 700 miles an hour is pretty quick compared to perhaps what you might have flown before this, but most probably a Chipmunk. This particular T5 was the 38th of its run, built at Wharton, entered service in 1970 with 3 flying training squadron based at Royal Air Force Leeming. Those of you who collect numbers, this one was coded initially on the line as number 38 and was also used by the school's aerobatics team known as the Gemini pair. Many other JP teams, of course, you might remember those veterans amongst us, the Poachers, did a great job flying the JP. You can see once we get into the jet world how much more space is required just to do something as simple as a loop, eating up several thousand feet rather than several hundred. But a good steady aircraft for developing aerobatic techniques. Not high performance by any standard whatsoever, but a steady egg, so to speak. Like so many of these older aircraft, they've led several different lives. This one we used as a navigator trainer for many years at Finningley. And they then go through several owners. This one Went through several lives before ending up with North Wales Military Aviation Services, who, like so many others, do a lot of redevelopment work and getting it cleared for aerobatic flights within the civilian regime. But actually really meticulous attention to detail, and a lovely slow roll being demonstrated by Dan there. Dan, a very talented jet pilot in his own right, having a considerable amount of time on the Tornado F3 between 2000 and 2004. Brought up not too far away from here to South Oxfordshire, and was part of the University of London Air Squadron based at Benson in the mid-90s. And a very nice topside pass. Great opportunity for him to see you and you to see him. Again, just a tiny bit of cross-controlling. Some of these maneuvers quite difficult, but in the hands of Dan, a piece of cake. He displayed the F3 for many years, his last display that being in the Czech Republic in 2011, before then going on to what we call a trapper, a sort of inspector in aviation terms. And that was Dan signing off there, sadly. Not a chance there. I thought we might have got one more pass out of him, but he's cleared away. And he's been at a desk for the last couple of years doing various paperwork jobs for developing pilots, and was involved in the F-35 simulator program as well. So a very talented chap.
If you're joining us live, thank you, and I hope you're enjoying this replay of a Planes TV live production. There's lots more of this content available at watch.planestv.com, our PTV on demand subscription service. Hundreds of hours of airshow content there, and of course lots of DVDs and Blu-rays at planestv.com. And of course, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Facebook page for more of this kind of content. Let's get back on with the airshow action.
Right now, I'm going to ask my friend Roger Kilby to put on the headset next to me, because we're expecting to see some pretty impressive... I see one already right in front of us here. Roger, tell us what's going to happen next.
Well, George, I'm from the Jet Modelers Association. We've got approximately 150 members all up and down the UK. And what we do, we fly gas turbine model aircraft, as you can see going down the runway now. This is Dave. Dave Wilshire's our chairman. He's going to demonstrate with this trainer version of it, this one is. For those of you who've got wives, it's about £300 to get off the air, but the reality is it's more like 3,000.
No, just not everybody can see it, and they're probably wondering what on earth you're talking about. And of course, that's because it's quite small at the moment on the hard standing behind the Midlands Air Ambulance. But it's getting airborne now, and you will see it very shortly. There we go.
There we go. This one's a twin boom trainer type airframe. The little tiny motor in there is a full gas turbine engine, fueled by standard A1 jet fuel. With these very small engines, we don't have any forced oil feed systems. It's rather like the old-fashioned two-stroke motorcycles. We put 5% oil in the fuel, and that is just enough to keep the bearings from overheating. Typically with these type of little miniature gas turbine engines, the tick over RPM is around about 40,000, and full power it's about 160,000, which obviously to you, general public who drive cars, and your maximum RPM is sort of 5,500 or 6,000, seems an awful lot, but there are very special bearings inside them which allow us to rev them this high.
I have to say, it's going quite fast.
Typically this particular airframe, top speed is probably, I don't know, 150 mile an hour.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me very much of a Civics in this particular model.
Yes, it's that sort of configuration, isn't it?
Now, training for this, I'm guessing, is probably as hard as training to be a real pilot. Am I right?
Yeah, very similar. We all belong to the British Model Flying Association, and there are various different training regimes that we go through. We all start off with little tiny IC engine trainers, and then we progress through until you get to this level. Dave's have actually been flying display flights for many, many years anyway, but as people are probably aware, up and down the UK, there are various model aircraft shows, and if you wish, you can always have a look on the websites and go and see them.
Now, I've got to ask you, do you fly as well, normal aircraft?
No, I don't. No, that's strange, isn't it? No, I don't.
Well, it's probably a lot cheaper. You've probably got a lot more money in the bank just flying models.
You would think so, yes. Hopefully so, anyway. These airframes, they take a fair bit of bashing, as you can see, because the G factor on a full-size aircraft is obviously the pilot, but with these, it's purely the strength of the physical airframe.
Yeah, no, I'll just interrupt you for a second, because while we've got a quiet moment, one of the key safety things of today, with this wind blowing strongly from the crowd onto the runway, not surprisingly, anything you haven't got a tight hold on is going to blow in towards the aircraft, and that does spell a potential bit of danger. So if you could please hang on to all your crisp packets and your sandwich wrappers and your umbrellas and anything else that may just blow away, please bear in mind that it is not a simple thing. It actually, in a day like today, could cause a problem for any of the pilots, any of the aircraft. Okay, so please hang on to everything. Thank you very much. And back to Roger.
Yeah, well, you can see Dave is doing various manoeuvres. And as you can see as well, he's going to go into a very slow speed manoeuvre now, almost a hover.
Richardson in the pits, S1S. Now just one of many manoeuvres you'll see her undertaking, going up there, hanging on the power of both the engine and the propeller combined, and letting it tumble over itself. I can assure you this was described by my colleague alongside me, Trevor Graham, as washing machine air displays. It is washing machine at 2,000 revs a minute, and puts in a little tumble and roll and flick at the top of there. And it's quite interesting how the pilots will do this. They're cleared to do a whole series of different maneuvers, and of course they judge the air, the wind, the climate and everything else, and indeed their own personal performance, and putting their display together. So they not necessarily come into it with a fixed display sequence. Now, I mentioned that Lauren was a bit of an engineering buff, and she is there. She goes along there in front of that knife edge. She's actually hand in glove with Hercules Propellers, who both she works for, designing, making wooden propellers, and also her sponsor for this spare time fun that she manages to squeeze in. Now, always holding anything inverted for any length of time, but she puts a slide in there as she brings it down as well. And not a very pleasant position to be in. If you can imagine being hung upside down and then pushing on the top of your head, you'll get some idea what that must feel like, and it's not very pleasant at all. Now, remember, most of you, as you're standing up, are experiencing about 1G, i.e. the force of your current body weight, but as they pull harder and harder either to get round the turns, or they push the other way to go over the top or indeed to run an outside turn, and we'll describe that a little later on, you can imagine all the weight is going in the other direction. Coming up now into a gentler, traditional stall turn from Lauren. Lovely slow roll there before she enters into that. This aircraft was actually built in 1982 to compete in the World Aerobatic Championships, hence some of the current modifications already on it. Powered, as I mentioned, by the 180 horsepower Lycoming, double the original Franklin that was put on by Curtis Pitts in 1942. The engine was used by Neil Williams, a well-known aerobatic champion himself many years back, and his aircraft actually hangs upside down in the Science Museum, giving it a real feel for what these chaps prefer doing. They rarely go anywhere in a straight line and get bored within seconds. A top speed of 200 miles an hour and a cruise speed of 155, together with her company and her propeller, the Hercules. Lauren doing everything you would expect her to do of a UK aerobatic champion. Now you'll see many people using smoke today. This is the wonderful Ondina. It's mineral oil, but so good as I've just been joined by Flash, who sat next to me. He says you can wash your babies in this and still have no issue at all. As most people using Ondina these days, it is totally environmentally friendly and not at all nasty. So Lauren, now if you get the chance while she's doing low-level stuff, do give her a wave, won't you? Now she's looking at you right now, boys and girls, and there'll be lots of opportunity for audience participation throughout the course of the afternoon. All these pilots today working incredibly hard, giving up a lot of time, and I can assure you 5 minutes doing this is worth about 2 hours in the gymnasium. I was asked with whom, though. I won't go into that. But nonetheless, now this is an example of her pushing, you see, against her body weight and all the blood rushing to her head. And a very, very uncomfortable position to be in, whether you're in the gym or in the aircraft. Controlled it well there with that wind behind her. She came into the crowd, holding it there. You can see, and you look at the drift on the aircraft now. And this all requires extra skill in positioning the aircraft for the next maneuver, keeping it in the display profile close to you so you can feel what it's like. You see what I mean about getting bored, so you never go further than about half a second in a straight line, and always throwing in spare maneuvers as well. Knife edging it down towards the ground there. And again, when looking at the top or flying past, do give her a big wave. Just the first of many display pilots here today. I think coming in for a low pass now. And what we call a 4-point hesitation, then followed by about 3 different rolls as well. You see the rate of roll of the pits. Really very, very good indeed. Very tight design. Very, very short aircraft, actually. It feels very strange when you actually climb in one. It doesn't feel like much of an aircraft at all. Another knife edge pass there, beautifully flown. And you see, you do a bit of cross-controlling when you do that. Those pilots out there will know all about that. But it makes, some of these pilots make it look very simple. But actually keeping aircraft going in a straight line at exactly the right altitude down the airfield is not easy. And you do have to use a little bit of rudder and a little bit of cross-stick controlling as well to keep it like that. Now, I just heard Team Raven calling up, which is good news, because they're going to be following on behind Lauren in just the next few minutes. So here she's looking out the top of the cockpit now. Come on, everyone, give her a wave. This is Lauren Richardson. And the Pitts S1S. Absolutely great way to start what is going to be a super show. Lovely colour scheme too. All the Pitts, ideal aircraft to paint up. And taxiing out now, you see Team Raven. Well, that got us off to a pretty breathtaking start. And all we're going to do for the rest of the afternoon is wind up the energy. Now, I was hoping a member of Team Raven was going to join me. Bob, if you're hovering around outside, do come on in. It'll be good to chat to you. Well, just a few moments now. I see Lauren there making a sporting arrival. Look at that side slip. Again, a bit of cross-controlling going here. Watch does just push the rudder pedal in one way, stick the stick across in one way. And it's just a very quick way of losing altitude and also getting a very good view of the runway. You can imagine that sitting way back in that fuselage, you don't get a lot of visibility. However, an aircraft which we are about to get airborne now does have good visibility. And this is out of the van's stable, and essentially, as I referred to it earlier on, as a sporting tourer, but it is more than that. It is a very agile aircraft as well, and very strong, and is able to perform some scintillating aerobatics. And it's a real pleasure to welcome Team Raven here today, and in a few moments I'll be talking to one of the team members, and he'll describe a little bit more about this fabulous machine and what the team are going to be up to. So while they're just getting ready to get airborne, just to give you a quick update, you've seen an autogyro out there. That belongs to Peter Davis, and there are not many more people, I don't think, in this country who've got a level of experience that he has. Perhaps Ken Wallace was probably the closest in terms of the number of hours involved in all of that. And starting up at, literally in 15 minutes' time, you can learn to dance with the perfect vintage dancers. So if vintage dancing is your thing, we'll send Brendan along, I think, to join in that. He's one of our vintage pilots here today. Maybe John Beatty as well. But that's Team Raven getting airborne too. And we will... now I'm delighted to be joined by Bobski, as he's colloquially known. Bob, really good to have you here today. You were not expecting to chat, but nonetheless, great to see you.
Well, thanks very much. Very pleasant surprise. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. What you see taking off in front of you in bits and pieces at the moment is the 2015 Team Raven. Team Raven has its genesis in various other teams, including Team Osprey, with which I used to fly, Team Viper, and have between them flown most things from Tornadoes through to Chinook helicopters, with a lot of Russian radial engine and other stuff in between. So reformed this year, 2015, led by squadron leader, now retired, Sid Shirley, the only person on the team apart from Mark Southern who's actually ever been paid by anyone for going flying. The guys that you will see in all their beautifully turned out aircraft, all in matching colour schemes, comprise Sid Shirley, who's the leader. He's cracking the whip over the boys, won't tolerate any slackness. Flying at number 2 is Steve Lloyd, a businessman from South Wales who used to fly in Team Osprey. Number 3, that's on the leader's right-hand side, is Barry Gwinnett, another South Wales man, also an ex-Team Osprey member. Number 4, right out on the right-hand side, is Gerald Williams, former rugby player, and another ex-Osprey and Viper team member. And on the right out on the left-hand side, doing the hardest job of all, apart from Gerald, is Mark Southern, who's currently busy in his day job, sending people off to the sunshine.
Yes, some well-known names in the flying fraternity there. But Bob, you've done a bit of yak flying yourself, I think, in the past.
Yeah, I've racked up a few yak hours. Started doing that in the early 1990s, just after the wall came down. Spent 5 or 6 summers in Russia, flying with the remnants of the Russian Air Force.
Yeah, it's a super aircraft. So would you say something to really hone your skills on before you get onto something what I would refer to as more slippery?
The Yak 52 is a magnificent aeroplane. It broke my heart to have to sell mine, but they are absolutely superb. They are big Russian radial engined aircraft, 350 odd horsepower, weighs just over a metric ton and a bit. And will do anything that you ask of it without braking.
So back to you now. We're flying in. Please welcome Team Raven.
And here's the team pulling up for their first figure, which is a formation loop. Now what you see there is 5 blokes, only one of whom is watching where he's going. Sid is leading the team. Everybody else has got their eyes glued on the aeroplane next to them to make sure that they maintain perfect reference. If you look at that and you think about the dynamics of it, then you'll realise that the further out you are from the leader, the harder you're working. At the moment, they're turning round, just positioning for the next manoeuvre. That first figure was a loop. I think someone mentioned earlier that we're all sat here with 1G pulling us down. In the loop, they're pulling about 3.5 to 4G. Think about that. Average human head weighs about 12 pounds. So at the max pull on a loop, it's like flying with a sack of cement on your head. So now you're going to see the bottoms of the aircraft. These are Van's aeroplanes, so they aren't as oily as the Russian jobs. And again, the guy highest up on the right-hand side there is the one doing the hardest job. The guy on the extreme left-hand side is coming back on the throttle. On the outside, they're going forward on the throttle. All the time, the guys on the outside are working the stick, working the throttle, trying to maintain perfect position on the leader. And as they go round, they're shifting formation now. And this, and you'll forgive me because I don't actually have my pace notes in front of me. This is a Stinger where we have a Vic of 3 at the front and then 2 trailing behind. And they'll be pulling back in now for their next figure. Between them, they've got, I think Mark has got the most hours. He's probably logged tens of thousands of hours, most of it asleep at the wheel. All the other guys have actually spent their time wiggling the stick. So probably about 5,000 hours of flying time between them. So there we are. That's a quarter clover. That's half a loop with half a roll thrown in. That takes them around and back the other side. And off on what is known as the 45 outline. What they're doing is they're looking at the ground, or rather Sid is looking at the ground, everyone else is watching him.
Now Chris will put this through some gentle manoeuvres, wing overs, a few loops, perhaps the odd roll as well, without overstressing the aircraft in any way whatsoever. Talented man, as I say, and able to really feel the needs of the aircraft as much as yourselves there to show it off. So here we have the Texan version of the very successful Harvard family, dating back to the 1930s. This one was actually built in 1942 and one of 3,000 T6D models, differing from the basic Harvard, and it has fixed forward firing .30 machine guns and a rear perspex canopy also opening forward. But an excellent trainer, now used by a lot of training schools as a preliminary flying experience before going on to fly the more notable warbirds that are still flying today, like the Mustang and the Spitfire. And Chris, Royal Naval officer, he's currently the head of the Royal Naval Historic Flight, based at Yeovilton, and a very pleasurable job that is indeed to hold. I was chatting to him only a week or so ago as to whether he was going to get back into frontline flying, because I know he was earmarked for potential F-35 training across in the States, but I think he's rather enjoying his historic flying a little too much. We were talking about aero modelling earlier on, and Chris was very much into aero modelling before he got into glider flying. worked in industry for just a short time before taking to the air himself. Started his flying on the T-10 Chipmunk and then the T-67 Firefly. We're going to see the Chippy later on, which is based in his hangar down at Yeovilton. And did his elementary flying training up at Totcliffe. But it wasn't long before he went on to fast jet streaming, flew the Tucano for a while, and then onto the advanced tactical phase on the BAE Hawk with 208 Squadron in RAF Valley. Chris, no stranger to this class of aircraft. The Fury just sort of one up in terms of speed and power, but a large manoeuvrable. This is very much a sort of practice warbird, so to speak, but these were armed. A 9-cylinder radial Pratt & Whitney Wasp on the front end as well, with a good 600 horsepower, really meaty, and you hear that roar. That's very much the propeller when it's fully forward in fine pitch, almost touching supersonic speeds. Got a cruising speed of about 160 miles an hour and a top speed in a dive of 250. Fully aerobatic, but you can see why this is such a gentle display, because overstressing any of these aging aircraft, of course, is a real problem, and it just gives them that extra bit of longevity if we treat them like the old ladies that they are. 17,000 of these were built either as Harvards or other variants such as the T6 for the US Army. Really favourite, a huge number of them still flying, racing at the likes of Reno and various solo displays around the world. It was popular with Gary Newman many years ago, who you may recall flew as a pair with another Navy pilot, Norman Lees, back in the 80s as the radial pair. And now the standard stepping stone to move on to the more dynamic and powerful warbirds. In his naval career, Chris went on to fly the Sea Harrier, having completed all his jet training, and was based with 800 Naval Air Squadron on HMS Invincible. Saw service throughout the Iraq and Kosovo campaigns, before then becoming a test pilot. He spent a total of 6 years at Boscombe Down, now Kinetic of course, but it was the, still incorporated in that is the Empire Test Pilot School. And this is really where he learnt all the detailed stuff, management. He knows his engine tone and notes inside out, his control rods and cables, all embedded in his psyche. It sounds like the Midlands Air Ambulance has got a shout, as they say in the business, and we'll be getting airborne as well once we've seen Chris go through his paces here. As well as the Sea Fury, Chris used to regularly demonstrate and fly the Seahawk as well. That's currently in the hangar. Needs a considerable amount of refurbishment and thus money raising to get that back in the sky. But a very nice collection of aircraft he has there. And of course, part of his responsibility is the remarkable and indomitable Swordfish, which we will see around the country later this summer. Quite a lively aircraft, can be a handful for people who first start on this, particularly on the runway. And those of you near the front may just see the Midlands Air Ambulance just starting up. He's just called for a rotor start now. They clearly won't be getting airborne until Chris has finished his display, but they've just been called out for an emergency. So there he goes, this is Chris giving you a wave now, boys and girls, mums and dads, do give him a wave too, working really hard. He's got to go all the way back to Yeovilton now, but thank goodness at least he's got a nice clear day. You can see for miles today, it's just pilot stream. Oh, and a lovely roll just to depart as well, delightful. Well, that's Chris, just a short gap now while we get the EC135 in the air to go off these guys. Part of the fundraising today, of course, goes in support of the first-class life-saving that these people produce, a mixture of both highly trained and competent pilots together with paramedics as well. And they're all focused around what we call the golden hour, which is getting the casualty to the level of care required in the shortest possible time. Well, we're hoping as soon as we got the chopper up and running that we will see the beautiful Blenheim. Absolutely gorgeous condition, had a very bit of a checkered life. It's taken quite a long time to get it back in the air, and I think it will be a great joy to see.
If you're joining us live, thank you, and I hope you're enjoying this replay of a Planes TV live production. There's lots more of this content available at watch.planestv.com, our PTV on demand subscription service. Hundreds of hours of airshow content there, and of course lots of DVDs and Blu-rays at planestv.com. And of course, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Facebook page for more of this kind of content. Let's get back on with the airshow action.
Probably Britain's first multi-role aircraft, such was the range of uses that it was put to. Initially brought in under Lord Rothermere's guidance as a small airliner in 1934, but it was quickly transformed into what the RAF then operated as a hugely successful light bomber. Faster at its stage than the fighter aircraft that were on order, and became very much the backbone of the light bomber force at the start of World War II. Would you believe there were more Blenheims in service at the start of the war, over 1,000 of them, than any other aircraft, and bore the brunt of the very early bombing campaign. Of course, the development of aviation during the Second World War is now legendary. The aircraft pressed into other roles, such as the long-range fighter and night fighter, truly becoming the first multi-role aircraft. Please welcome now John Romain from the Aircraft Restoration Company and the Bristol Blenheim. Managed an was very privileged to crawl around this aircraft just before it flew again after a long time in restoration, and I was hugely impressed with the amount of restoration work and the minute detail that John Romain and his staff at Duxford have gone into. Supported hugely, of course, by the Blenheim Society. Nothing like this ever comes cheap, but it is just terrific to see it back in the air. Hard to imagine that it suffered rather a checkered life, having various incidents, having taken to the flight again back in '87, only to be wrecked just 4 weeks after that return, then went into restoration, flew again in '83, supported hugely by a massive volunteer workforce, only then to suffer significant damage again on landing at Duxford. And here we are now, 12 years later, seeing the outcome of painstaking work. And I hope you can just get a feel there for the way John displays this. Of course, himself a massively talented pilot. He actually is an aircraft engineer, but now is one of the most experienced Spitfire pilots we have in the country. But you can see how this was adopted in so many roles. It's quite agile for the classification of bomber, and given its speed, which was pretty phenomenal at the start of the Second World War, you can see why its role as a fighter also was significant until we brought the rest of the Air Force's better-known fighters back onto the front line. Not a cheap aircraft to run this. We were just discussing how much it costs to actually display it. The engine's soaking up good 28 to 30 gallons an hour each side, so that's a lot of fuel. In its early days, initially constructed, as I say, as a small airliner, it was nicknamed the Spirit of Britain, but I think in its bomber configuration even more aptly earns that description. Like so many of the Second World War aircraft, carving their groove in history, the crews of the Blenheims were likened by Winston Churchill, paying homage to them and their bravery in exactly the same vein as what he referred to as the charge of the Light Brigade. Big in numbers, light in nimble an aircraft, and just as well we had them in the early months of the war. And I just hear John calling up now, positioning for the last pass, and we really hope you enjoyed this. This is a true gem of an aircraft to have at Throckmorton this year, and this is the very first year for a very long time that British people have been able to see this aircraft. So maybe you can show your support for John, all the hard work of all the volunteers of the Blenheim Society as well that work so hard to get this aircraft back in the air. He's going to make one pass now before he departs back to Duxford, coming in from the left-hand side. Give him a wave or a cheer or a clap or whatever you got. Hats, coats, umbrellas. There we go, the Bristol Blenheim. Well done, John. Splendid. Well, while we've got a little gap before we see the Rolls-Royce Spitfire, we're just going to give a quick update on what's going in the arena. I gather the schedule's completely upside down. Sam, what on earth is going on?
Well, just to let you know that that rollover demonstration that was meant to be at 1:45 isn't happening for safety reasons. The fire service say that they just need to hold off a bit on that one. So we're going to move the Griffon start up and then the perfect vintage singing. Move them all forward along with the other Griffon start, and we'll have the rollover demonstration at the end of the day, and then if there is any mess after their demonstration, they can clear that up all safe and sound. So it's just so that the cars that are still coming in, the fire service can be there just in case anything happens, and they're just holding off while that's all still going on, and we'll bring all the displays forward. So we'll start with the Griffon start very shortly, as soon as I get back over there.
Great. Well, I'm glad you're not bored. Anyway, that's fantastic news. Well done, Sam. Thank you very much for that. We've got the Rolls-Royce Spitfire coming up in a moment. Then the fabulous Twister duo, Peter Wells and Chris Burkitt. And that'll be followed by Richard Goodwin in Gee Whiz, a really fabulous pit special. If you like Lauren, I think you're going to really enjoy Richard. He is on the boundaries of being completely nuts, but still can manage a very sensible conversation when standing up. And I've got to say, I don't know how he does it in this aircraft, but that's going to conclude the second third. We're sort of working 3/3 of an air show today. 3 bits because we're packaging this little lot together. Then we'll have a few more models, and then we'll sort of go into a real sort of phenomenal feature of vintage aircraft and training aircraft, starting with the Vulcan at 3 o'clock, which I'm told it remains on schedule. So we're just listening out now for Chris Hadlow to check in. I make it about a minute to go until we expect to see him in the sky. I think it is unlikely we will see any of the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight fighters here today. I understand that the wind really is howling, but keep your eyes to the right now. Please welcome from Rolls-Royce the marvellous Mk19 Spitfire and its incredible Griffon engine. And what deep joy he must be having there. It's a cracking day, isn't it? And these aircraft produced in greater numbers than any other British combat aircraft before or since the war. 20,341 Spitfires were built in 20 different variants. And that was excluding the Seafire. The aircraft remained in production for 12 years. First prototype was in March 1936, and the first Mark I's entered service in August 38. Spitfires fought in every operational theatre of the war and remained in Royal Air Force frontline service right up until 1954. At the end of its development, the Spitfire carried an engine producing more than twice the power of the original. Its maximum takeoff weight and rate of climb had more than doubled, and its firepower had increased by a factor of 5, with its maximum speed having increased by a third, all in very much the same original airframe. It's in a way very sad that R.J. Mitchell never saw the incredible and outrageous success the Spitfire had. He died in, well, before it really sort of took to the skies in combat. but nonetheless his legacy lives on with that fabulous elliptical wing, a stunning design, just thick enough to get some guns and the undercarriage tucked in, but of course thin enough to give it the outstanding aerial performance that you're seeing now. This particular Spitfire, owned and operated by Rolls-Royce, is an unarmed, high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft variant and was one of a batch of 79 Mk19s built at Supermarine in Southampton. Powered by the 2,050 horsepower Griffin 65 or 66, very much representing the pinnacle of the Spitfire's development. Capable of a top speed of 446 miles an hour and a ceiling of a remarkable 42,000 feet. This aircraft was first delivered to the Central Photographic Reconnaissance Unit at RF Benson in January 1945. Although very late in the war, it did, however, take part in one well-known operation, that of Crossbow, which was engaged to detect the V1 and V2 launch sites. In the cockpit today, Chris Hadlow, himself yet another very experienced Royal Air Force pilot, having flown the Jaguar on operations from August 1993 onwards on 6th Squadron for many years at RAF Coltishall, and was engaged, unsurprisingly, in various operations over the former Republic of Yugoslavia and the UN mission Operation Deny Flight. Also married to another Royal Air Force pilot, Dawn. So aviation running right through the family. No doubt his children will end up flying as well. He went on to become an instructor on the Hawk at RAF Valley, teaching air-to-ground weaponry. And then was lucky enough to get a trip in France, flying the Alpha Jet out of Bordeaux. How tough that must have been. The aircraft spent a while on the thumb team, the temperature and humidity upper air mass teams that were used to research meteorology. He was retired into ceremonial duties with the RAF Historics flight for a while before, of course, the BBMF was formed. Well, very sadly, he called a very complete late call there, having pulled up, so I was hoping we'd get one more pass out of him, but we really hope to enjoy it. That was Chris Hadlow with the Rolls-Royce Mk19 Spitfire, Papa Sierra 853, and unsurprisingly, the Spitfire, having played a major part in achieving ultimate victory in World War II, truly deserving its place as probably the most successful fighter design ever, and certainly as the most famous and charismatic of all time. Well, now we're going to see something very different. We're back into the world of formation aerobatics. This time, the pair of remarkable chaps, Peter Wells and Chris Burkett, both well-known names in the British air display circuit. They've just finished a couple of weeks touring around Holland, I'm told, having been displaying over there. Chris Burkett, new on the wing of Pete Wells this year. Pete Wells, you may remember, familiar name alongside the likes of Guy Westgate and John Gowdy over the last few years, now teamed up with Chris. And Chris got his own excellent pedigree as an individual aerobatic ace in his own right. I see the RVs also winding up. I think they're about to get airborne to take some of their VIPs flying. They're due to go in just a couple of minutes, so they'll probably pull out and taxi in front of the Twisters. And then we'll see the Twisters, and then Richard Goodwin will follow that, and I think we'll be recovering the RVs before the Vulcan lands. So a bit of a movement in down the schedule. I suspect your program may well have said the Twisters were going to be on later, but unsurprisingly, with all the various changes during the last week or so, we'll be concluding this afternoon actually with a unique display from John Beatty in the Chipmunk, and his own personal aircraft. You may see it on the flight line down there with some curious colours. It's actually in Portuguese colours. But we just got a little gap now whilst we taxi out the RVs ahead of the Twisters. So, having departed Team Raven now, we're off to do a bit of VIP flying around the countryside, getting airborne now, Peter Wells and Chris Burkett. Now, the Twister, a super little aircraft, is a bit like a small, modern plastic Spitfire to a certain extent. It's got a similar sort of shape and size, but altogether a different aircraft. They're also home-built. And Peter Wells, having started up an incredibly successful company with the extraordinary name of Zulu Glass Tech, he's now probably one of the country's top, what can we say, engineering and airframe authorities in this sort of modular construction. His aircraft initially started out in design as a world-beating radio-controlled aerobatic machine, but developed by the Stryker brothers, Matthias and Thomas in Germany, into a real version of what started as a model. Starts very much as a sort of foam core in construction, and then thin layers of glass fibre for both the fuselage and the wings is built up. The great thing is that although it's quite an expensive procedure, it makes them both lightweight but also incredibly strong, and you'll see why you need the toughness when you see some of the maneuvers that Chris and Pete will put together in this routine. Lots of experience, both of them, but their first season together here, and having seen them once this year, I think you're going to be thrilled with it you're going to see next. You see them right out now in front of you. So that's it, you no doubt caught that in the background. Once all the management's given a clearance to display, and we have to ensure, of course, every time that the airspace is both clear of any other obstructions, and indeed that there's nobody running around the site as well. Again, just a quick reminder while we've got a moment before they run in, please hang on to all your belongings. There's a very strong wind blowing onto the runway, which does create a bit of what we call a FOD hazard. And we do urge you to hold on to your sandwich wrappers and your crisp packets and your hats and coats. Thank you very much. So, for Throckmorton 2015, a debut performance to a certain extent here for these two together. Pete's been many times, and Chris, I think, has been here before in his extra, I suspect, but flying in together now on the left. The Twister duo, Pete Wells and Chris Burkett. And you see very graceful performance indeed as they pull up with Chris right on the tail into a gorgeous barrel roll, and the sky just perfect for them here today. With this smoke pouring out, you'll easily be able to track all the drift, but a masterclass in precision pairs formation work. So we'll drop in and out of the cockpits now and again. You see that they're having to adjust all the way round with this strong wind beating out, but now pulling up again. Leading Peter Wells very much from a gliding background, and you can see some of the maneuvers very much coming from his gliding experience. His entire family, father, brothers and wife, all held various national titles and even some world records as well. The business I was referring to earlier on very much started in South Africa many years ago with his colleague. His actually nickname was Zulu, hence the description of his company, Zulu Glass Tech, and now one of the best known composite repair shops in the country. Peter first set eyes on this twister kit at an aerofair in Germany, and from then on was hooked by it, brought it back, and has very much become the development of this aircraft on behalf of the manufacturers, with his own innovations built in both to the aircraft and to the display. Pulling up, holding there on the power, beautifully timed stall turns. Just a big boot of rudder going in there as they drift back down to earth, looking totally down on the ground. And you just get a slight smell of that smoke there, but it's all environmentally sound, as we discussed earlier on. A wonderful mineral oil Ondina. And we'll drop into the cockpit in a moment, and you'll hear Peter calling out. They're going to pull up now into what we call the avalanche. It's a bit of a serious headache, but just the first of many. You can see flicks it on the way up. In the other cockpit, Chris Burkett has really had aviation in his blood most of his life. First flew aerobatics in a Chipmunk as a Royal Air Force cadet, and was part of the Captain Neville's flying circus, barnstorming Chipmunk in his early years, but now very much in the throes himself, an award-winning aerobatic champion, performing across the globe from China to Bahrain as well as in Europe. And when he isn't flying one of these twisters, you'll often see him in the G-Force Extra alongside many others. Bit of a challenge for him, flying number 2, as he's used to predominantly flying on his own most of the time. And you'll notice that when they are together, he is literally just meters from Peter's aircraft. So repositioning now for another head-on pass. Stand by with your cameras.
Peter, pitching, go.
And as they come over the top, they're both looking at each other, making sure they get the separation absolutely right. And a lovely interweaving maneuver there, both coming wingtip to wingtip. There, pressing to his head and also adjusting. Look how much angle he's got off into the wind there as he's coming along upside down. Graceful aircraft, isn't it? This and reasonably economical. You could purchase and put one of these together in your backyard, a bit like the RV-8s. And relatively cheap to operate, and a good touring aircraft. There's a reasonable amount of room in the cockpit there for the size of the aircraft, and very comfortable, great view. Aerobatic figure work. your eyes peeled now as the smoke comes on again. They're adjusting for the wind. You can see them angled in. Getting close. They're going to pull up into what we call a quarter clover. You can see them bouncing around there, such the turbulence. And look how close they are. As they pull up into this, you'll see them drift a little bit. And they're putting that turn now, and they go out on what we call the B-axis, straight out over the top of the wingsock. They're pulling up now and holding it. They're going for a stall turn, which means they're putting that, see, big bit of rudder. Everybody getting their stall turns really on the nail today. Requires a lot of dedication and practice, of course. None of this comes simply, and hours and hours of time spent during the winter perfecting. So pulling up again this time, I suspect they'll be going up in front of you and then splitting. It'll be a break. Stand by. Here we go. And forming a rather oblique heart. First complete one of the day. That is the Twisters complete. And a marvellous bit of display flying that was indeed. Super aircraft, super people. Very entertaining. They'll be coming in. You'll see them hopping out of their cockpits in a moment. Do all get the chance as they taxi in past you to give them a wave when you're there. All working incredibly hard, and I cannot stress how exhausting some of this work is. They are so good, of course. They make it all look very, very simple. And while we've got another moment there, we'll just update you on what's going on behind. I suspect there are families and children who are not necessarily as enamored with everything that's going on in front of them, and there is lots of stuff behind you as well to entertain you, bring you right up to speed with that. Our girl about town, Sam Weller.
Hi there, George. Thanks very much. Yeah, so due to the shuffling about of the programme in the central arena, I can now let you know that at 14:30, so that is any minute now, the Vintage Duo will be singing for you for half an hour until 3 o'clock. And then there'll be a break for the Vulcan and the BBMF, which I'm sure you will all be really keen to see. And so again, at 15:45 until 1600. So 3:45, the Griffin will start up again. We've had some good crowds for that. So
oh, that's brilliant news. I'm really pleased to hear it, because of course we've seen one flying, and now you get the chance to get up close to it.
Yeah, there was a really good crowd just after the Spitfire had been up in the sky. So that was absolutely brilliant. And so the last thing of the day will be at 4:15, and that's the rollover demonstration. So that is what's going on in the central arena from now on.
Now, just to remember, that's not your poodle rolling over, is it? It's a car.
No, we've had the dog agility. It's now the turn of the emergency services to show you what they can do.
Alrighty, well that sounds a lot of fun, but mind you, there's even more fun coming in the sky, because on the right-hand side you see a blisteringly, excitingly coloured pits, and but this is a very, very different one indeed, and it's also a very different pilot, one totally dedicated to his professional activity as a display pilot. Also, you may well find him airborne on the international circuit as well, if you happen to be travelling off to the Far East or North America as a commercial pilot, but today in what we call his muscle biplane. But I've got somebody with me who's going to tell you all about that, and he'll be with me in just a second. So here we go. This is the muscle biplane, Richard Goodwin, and please welcome Greg Payno to tell us all about this remarkable pilot and aircraft.
Yes, thank you, George. In front of you now, Rich Goodwin in the S2S Pits Special. Richard As George mentioned, normally an airline pilot by day, too boring for him. And what he does on his weekends is pretty much what you see in front of you now. That pit special, a massive 8.8 litre engine in it, that's 540 cubic inches, and he has modified it quite a bit to put on a very special display for you. Richard's hoping that his biplane will get Europe-wide recognition, particularly for the modifications he's done to it and its ability to hang on the propeller and use some of the gyroscopic effects of the propeller to produce a very different looking airshow. Richard's signature manoeuvre, the Tower of Power, which you'll see in a few minutes, showing off to the best of its abilities the incredible performance of this particular S2S. This one built in 1991, originally with the Australian aerobatic team, and then it was sold here in the UK. It changed owners a few times, and then Richard got his hands on it and started pulling it apart and putting modified bits back on it. He's still in the process. Bigger engine, bigger rudder, new wings coming for next year, different control surfaces, you name it. Richard's played with it, all to produce something quite different. As you can see, he's also got a very impressive smoke system on it. That's so you can keep a track of exactly what he's doing in the sky, and it's a little louder than normal as well, so it produces quite a bit of noise, but I think you'll all agree it certainly catches the attention.
Yeah, it's an absolutely stunning performer, and he deserves a lot of credit for this. I know he's really applied himself and just about everybody else in the industry to get this far, and tremendous air spend. They're absolutely superb figure going up, but look at the drift.
Richard will be, to a great degree at the moment, assessing just how much this wind is going to be affecting his manoeuvres. He did have a plan exactly of what he was going to do today. It came with a caveat, though, that he might have to do some freestyle aerobatics towards the end to give the best view for the crowd.
Yes, I was explaining earlier on that most of these guys get an authorization to do certain maneuvers, and then it's up to them how they actually put it together on the day. So even someone like yourself, Greg, who's seen Richard fly many, many times, and I have as well, you never actually really know what he's going to do next, other than the fact that he's definitely going to do something.
Absolutely, George. Yes, and at the moment you can see some of those shoulder rolls that he executes. That's again using the torque capabilities of the gyroscopic effect of the propeller, coming back across the crowd line, low to build up some speed, building up energy to pull into some more vertical maneuvers, over into a Cuban, and then some more shoulder rolls. He'll recover from this in the inverted position at a 45-degree down, and then again building up energy across the crowd line to pull into another vertical maneuver. Pushing 1/2 of an outside loop. And again building up energy across the crowd line to do a climbing knife edge and into some tumbles. Again a knife edge pass, and now Richard going into a rolling outside flat turn. So he's turning to the right while rolling to the left, a bit like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time, quite difficult to do.
And switching between negative and positive G, I mean, that would just drive me insane. I would definitely have difficult walking and would probably be throwing up by now. That is real tumble dryer flying, isn't it?
It is, in fact, that's one of his favourite descriptions for it. He says it's like being inside a washing machine. Now this is a flat turn, just using the rudder, not rolling with the wings at all. And again, straight into the vertical, displaying the incredible power that this aeroplane has, hanging on the propeller, airspeed falling away to almost nothing. And he's just using the wind to make it look like the aircraft is hovering statically over the centre of the runway. This aeroplane stressed for +6 to -5 Gs, and Richard uses all of those, I can assure you. At the beginning of his airshow season, even Richard occasionally makes himself a bit sick.
Oh, I'm really pleased to hear that, actually. That's good to know, because I just wonder how you can stand it. Really, really intense this. I'm trying to get it across to people just what it's like to be in this cockpit. And I mean, I tell you what, it's unbelievable, the stress is. I say it's definitely worth several hours in the gymnasium. Just 5 minutes doing these sort of maneuvers. Now, he's preparing for his tower of power, I reckon, because he's just putting in a bit of extra time to the climb. So back to Greg.
Yeah, the engine has to work rather hard on these aerobatic maneuvers, the ones that involve a lot of vertical maneuvering, and just to give it a cooling off period, he climbs away, then dives the aircraft. He needs all the energy he can get. He'll be pulling up into the vertical and starting to roll. Hanging on the propeller and letting the torque of the engine turn the aircraft in the opposite direction to the propeller. Diving back down along the runway again to recover. And into some more shoulder rolls or tumbles. For any of the pilots out there in the crowd who are wondering just what this feels like, I can tell you it's hugely disorientating, and for the first few times, probably for the first few months of trying this sort of thing, it's hugely nauseating as well. Richard is able to string this sequence of events together only because he practices it all the time. Whenever he's not flying the Boeing 757s and 767s and taking people on their holidays to Spain or Greece or Turkey or wherever, Richard can be found out by the airfield in his beloved Pitts S2S, either practicing or modifying it.
Yes, I was talking to Lauren as well about practicing. The tolerances you require for doing this work are pretty extreme as well. And if you don't practice for at least once a week, if not 2 or 3 times a week, it's very quickly how your tolerance fades away, isn't it?
That's right, yes, and it's because it's seasonal here in the UK. It's the weather's obviously not as good during the winter time for him to practice. So coming into the summer season, where all the air shows start, is a time for him to get the extra practice in, and it's the time when he starts to feel a bit nauseous himself, and then by the end of the...
we're all pointing at this remarkable inverted flat turn. Absolutely superb.
It is good. Richard's just put a new rudder on that. The modification went on about 3 months ago. He's very much inspired by the US air shows, people like Skip Stewart, etc., who have similarly modified biplanes, and it's definitely the smoke, the noise, the tight aerobatic manoeuvres that catch the eye, even for people who aren't necessarily aeroplane buffs. It's still a very, very eye-catching display, and I believe he is the only person in Europe that's demonstrating like this. And in fact, he's desperately seeking a sponsor that will take him to some of the air shows further east in Europe, where he can again show off the abilities of his wonderful biplane.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if he got his hands ever on an Extreme XA41. And just, I'd like to see what he would do with something like that, because this is all Richard's own work, actually, this aircraft. He really has developed it and pumped it up. Now, I suspect he may go into a knife edge, I don't know, but...
absolutely, yes, he will.
All right, here we go, boys and girls. This is his signature trademark as he took off. Knife edge all the way down, barely 50 feet above the runway. Not sure whether he can see you, but you can see him. Please give him a wave as he goes down. This is Richard Goodwin in the Muscle biplane. With a little bit of crazy flying thrown in. He is an extraordinary chap and totally dedicated to this. He must drive his family absolutely potty.
Yes.
I've never met a more intense guy who just wants to get it right and really perfects the routine. And he has worked diligently and hard, and goodness knows how many pounds he's put into this. But a really superb demonstration of aerobatic flying. and he just gets better and better. And the airplane really, as you were describing, does look superb.
He's very much a single-minded individual when it comes to his display routine. Of course, his background in aviation stems back to his father, who was a display pilot with the Royal Air Force on Hunters and Lightnings as well. So it's in his blood to a degree, and I guess he's carrying on in that tradition. Rich Goodwin Airshows, there's a good website. He's on Twitter and all the usual media outlets. So for those people out there who want to know more, please do log on, richgoodwinairshows.com, and show him your support.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Greg. Really kind of you to add a bit of flavour to that. You clearly know him and the aircraft very well, and we look forward to seeing you as well as Richard back at other air shows during the year. But right now, we're going to get back into model airframes again, and Roger is lined up ready to come and chat to us about the next run of model aircraft, because it's just a short gap now before the Vulcan appears at 3 o'clock, and I know that is going to be the spectacle of most people's day here today.
If you're joining us live, thank you, and I hope you're enjoying this replay of a Planes TV live production. There's lots more of this content available at watch.planestv.com, our PTV on demand subscription service. Hundreds of hours of airshow content there, and of course lots of DVDs and Blu-rays at planestv.com. And of course, remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Facebook page for more of this kind of content. Let's get back on with the airshow action.
We're flying in. Please welcome Team Raven.
And here's the team pulling up for their first figure, which is a formation loop. Now what you see there is 5 blokes, only one of whom is watching where he's going. Sid is leading the team. Everybody else has got their eyes glued on the aeroplane next to them to make sure that they maintain perfect reference. If you look at that and you think about the dynamics of it, then you'll realise that the further out you are from the leader, the harder you're working. At the moment, they're turning round, just positioning for the next manoeuvre. That first figure was a loop. I think someone mentioned earlier that we're all sat here with 1G pulling us down. In the loop, they're pulling about 3.5 to 4G. Think about that, average human head weighs about 12 pounds, so at the max pull on a loop, it's like flying with a sack of cement on your head. So now you're going to see the bottoms of the aircraft. These are Van's aeroplanes, so they aren't as oily as the Russian jobs. And again, the guy highest up on the right-hand side there is the one doing the hardest job. The guy on the extreme left-hand side is coming back on the throttle. On the outside, they're going forward on the throttle. All the time, the guys on the outside are working the stick, working the throttle, trying to maintain perfect position on the leader. And as they go round, they're shifting formation now. And this, and you'll forgive me because I don't actually have my pace notes in front of me. This is a Stinger where we have a Vic of 3 at the front and then 2 trailing behind. And they'll be pulling back in now for their next figure. Between them, they've got, I think Mark has got the most hours. He's probably logged tens of thousands of hours, most of it asleep at the wheel. All the other guys have actually spent their time wiggling the stick. So probably about 5,000 hours of flying time between them. So there we are. That's a quarter clover. That's half a loop with half a roll thrown in. That takes them around back the other side. And off on what is known as the 45 outline. What they're doing is they're looking at the ground, or rather Sid is looking at the ground, everyone else is watching him. Sid's looking at the ground and allowing for the wind and trying to get the team in perfect position. Basically, they will be flying one of 4 lines. They'll be flying the crowd line, which is parallel to you lot. They will be flying the B axis, which is at 90 degrees coming straight in or straight out from you, or a 45 line. So the 45 line in and out is generally for positioning. The A and B lines are generally the display lines. So the figures will be orientated around that. Thankfully, we've been provided with a little hut to sit in, which has got a window in the roof. This is unusual at air shows because usually you're blind half the time.
It's very true. It also helps keep you very warm, Bob.
Yes, it does. So there's the boys going out on the B axis, trailing a bit of smoke, and if memory serves, they will now be pulling up. Oh gosh, yes they are. Now look at the spacing there. It's all going rather nicely at the moment. A little bit of wing waggling going on, but generally very tidy indeed. So Mark and Gerald on the far outside go away. That was their bomb burst figure, and what's going to happen now is that the three guys going away from you, travelling now from your right to left across in front of you in the way distance, will be joining up into a 3, or a Vic as it's known. Sid in front and Barry and Steve on his wing. Mark and Gerald now running in with some smoke on for a crossover. That always gets your attention when you're doing that.
Now, it's the ideal aircraft. It's a super nimble, flexible machine, this, isn't it?
The RV is very good in some respects. It's a very fast aeroplane, and it's got a very good power to weight ratio. It's got approximately 180 horsepower, and it weighs probably about 750 to 800 kilos. So it's actually an easier aeroplane to fly in formation because it's easier to gain and lose speed.
Oh, don't convince everybody it's that easy. They're working really hard, these guys.
It's easier.
Yeah. No, I always prefer to be the leader of these things. Bobbing around on the wing today is a little bit bumpy, isn't it?
When we flew in, it was definitely bumpy. And one of the things that display pilots will know, and may not necessarily be as apparent, is of course that although on the ground here we can feel the wind and we know that it's blowing roughly over towards where the aircraft are now turning around, if you are flying, then the amount of turbulence increases the closer you get to the ground, and the direction of the wind changes as you get to the ground. That's because the Earth spins and is a bit lumpy, and the air that gets turned over the top of it bumbles around and rattles around and changes. So you can start your formation display at 1500.
We described them earlier on. Look as they sort of flash round into the wind there as well. Magnificent sight, really flexible, versatile, and relatively economic aircraft to fly. So as the Ravens recover, just a note please for Mark, Dodd and Mia and Harry, would you please meet Claire Nicol at the Blue RAF simulator. Mark, Dodd, Mia and Harry, please meet Claire Nicol at the Blue RAF simulator. Thanks very much. The RVs just now making their final approach. Well, I think we're going to move on rapidly now because it'll take another few minutes for the Ravens to come in. There's one on finals now, another one to recover. You can just see coming in there. In fact, two on finals and another one to recover after that. Interesting conditions this afternoon. We're now into the sort of final third of the day, but it is a long third. We've got a good hour and a half to go yet of aerial activity. And we're going to start it off with a real thunder and a wallop. So just bumping over the tops of the trees. You can see how the turbulence there, even off trees, can be quite significant. Doesn't need to be a big hill. A bit of side slipping there. Just, I'm not so sure who was flying that aircraft at the time. There we are. I suspect some of these VOPs having a go. And there's a big bump. That's not the pilot. There's a big bump in that runway, in case you see it bouncing down. So, an interesting aircraft next, and you're going to hear lots about that. So then we're hoping to see the Great War Team. That'll be followed by the Tutor, the Bulldog, then the Breitling Wingwalkers at 4:10. John Scott in his Cap 10, and then to finish off this afternoon, we'll have Brendan O'Brien. O'Brien's Flying Circus, who will be doing some very interesting and rather amusing stuff in a Piper Cup. behind us in the main arena, although I'm guessing that there won't be a lot of people there or a lot happening between 3 o'clock and 10 past 3. But during the rest of the afternoon, there's an assortment of dog agility, some vintage dancing to be had, and also you can get up close and personal to a Griffon engine and hear the mighty roar of the whole 37 litres of V12 2,000 horsepower roaring in the arena. So with the final RV on the ground from Team Raven now, it is the highlight of the afternoon, and we've got a most magnificent afternoon for it. It is, yes, the mighty Vulcan, and it is quite superb, quite remarkable, and I just don't have the words to describe it, but the very man who can do that spectacularly well is right alongside me. Please welcome Sean Maffett. Sean, good afternoon.
George, thank you very much indeed, and lovely to be at Throckmorton for Vulcan's first display of her final season flying. It's a salutary moment, really, at the end of this year. When she lands for the last time, that'll probably be sometime in October. That will not only be, we shall never see another Vulcan flying again, but we shall never see another 4-jet British-built aircraft flying again. So it's worth thinking about. That's one of the things that Vulcan has done. She has prolonged the life of the British-built 4-jet aircraft. As the Midlands Air Ambulance comes into land just in front of us, immaculately put down. Vulcan, you may have seen her. She's over on the far side of the airfield, waiting to run in. So Vulcan, she represents the very best imaginative, thinking out of the box virtues of aeronautical design and engineering. We reckon she represents the best of the great British people, and she does have the spirit of Great Britain painted on her nose. If this is the only air show that you're going to come to this season, this then will be the last time you'll ever see this extraordinarily beautiful machine. She is the most popular aeroplane in the country. At last year's Farnborough Air Show, they polled 16,300 Facebook followers to find the most popular flying display item. She came top. 5 weeks later, the readers of the Bournemouth Echo voted her top. So she is the people's aeroplane, no question about it. And the extraordinary thing is that the people of Great Britain, the United Kingdom, perhaps I should say, love her so much that they've given, in one way or another, something like 22 million to get her where she is today. 22 million pounds, which I think is a quite extraordinary reflection of how much she's loved. And we have figures that suggest that more than 22 million people have indeed seen her while she's been displaying, so you could say it's a pound per smile. She's still costing £2 million a year to run, £38,500 a week the trust has to raise. It's always been a struggle. She's not funded by the government, obviously, and she no longer belongs to the Royal Air Force. So when you get the chance, do go and see the Vulcan Club stand, which is off to the left-hand end of the display area, and you'll see their pennants there. Do please go and see them. They'll be able to put you in touch with how to keep in touch with the Vulcan, the website, vulcantothesky.org. And they've got an amazing raffle running there. I'll tell you more about that in a moment, but the tickets are £2 each, and some really fantastic prizes, including flying with the Vulcan. Now, she is just lining up to our left at the moment with Kev Rumans, the man flying her today. He's the co-captain. The other co-captain is Bill Ramsey. And there's a third member of the crew, the Air Electronics Officer, and that's Phil Davies for today. So as she comes running in from our left, starting to accelerate, she's coming in quite slowly. But you can see, I can see as I look straight to our left, you can see how strong the wind is from her right. She's quite drifting significantly, yawing to the left. Here she is, the Avro Vulcan. Now you can see the air brakes coming out on the top and bottom of the wing as she turns away there. That's to slow her down after the acceleration. We just heard the beginning of a Vulcan howl from those 4 Olympus jet engines. About 16,500 pounds of static thrust from each of those, 65,000 pounds in total. This is the aeroplane, don't forget, that protected this country against the threat of nuclear holocaust in the days when she was part of the mutually assured destruction that prevented the Third World War happening. Coming back in towards us, Kev Rumins will apply the power soon and take her into about 3/4 of a spiral climb. And that's the sound of the 65,000 pounds of static thrust. And that was intended to carry an amazing bomb load. After she stopped being a nuclear bomber, when she handed that awesome responsibility over to the Royal Navy, she became a conventional bomber, and she was able to carry 21 1,000-pound bombs in a huge bomb bay, which we shall see later. But as she comes by next time, you'll have noticed that the wheels have come down, all 18 wheels. And that's just to show what she looks like with the wheels down, because sad to say she won't be landing here today. There isn't quite the runway for it. But this is what she would be looking like if she were coming in to land. See those wheels retracting up into the fuselage to get her back to that clean shape. It's interesting that that shape is so clean, because it looks clean, and when she goes away from us you see that it's a very slim shape. And in fact, she was a stealthy aircraft long before stealth was even thought of. Well, I was talking about the conventional bomb load. At the end of her operational career, about 33 years ago, just over 33 years ago, in 1982, a Vulcan hit the center line of Port Stanley runway in the Falkland Islands with one bomb and the edge of the runway with another, making the runway unusable for Argentine fast jets. And until the Gulf War, it was the longest bombing raid in history, 7,760 miles round trip, about the same as from here to Bali in one hop. And it took no less than 18 air-to-air refuelings. The thing is, though, they had to drop 21 of those bombs to be sure of just having 2 of them hit the runway, because these were Second World War dumb bombs, and that's what you had to do. There is the bomb bay wide open. That's where those 21 1,000-pound bombs were held. So for the last few years of her life in the Royal Air Force, and she first flew in 1952, did the Vulcan prototype. The last few years there was just this one aircraft, this particular aircraft, that was called the Vulcan display flight, because the people did not want to let Vulcan go. But eventually the Royal Air Force had to retire her, and she was retired in 1993. And then 2 people decided, basically, well, a lot of people decided, but 2 particular people decided that she ought to be preserved, and if possible, preserved in a flying state. As she comes by this time, watch for those bomb bay doors closing. See that area that held the 21 1,000-pound bombs. The bomb doors are now closed. So in the 1990s, David Walton and his family, who bought this aircraft from the RAF and all the spares, and Dr. Robert Plemming, who decided that he ought to form something that eventually became the Vulcan to the Sky Trust to keep this magnificent aeroplane flying. Wonderful silhouetted against the puffy white clouds, and the camouflage colour scheme immaculately maintained by Taff Stone, the crew chief and chief engineer, who says 558, that's this aeroplane, XH558 is my baby. Team of 6 engineers who daily work miracles, keeping this 55-year-old aeroplane flying. And her number 558, 55 years she's been flying this particular aircraft, and 8 years since she was restored. And you can see there that she is as maneuverable as a fighter. She even has fighter-style control sticks. She doesn't have a big control yoke that most bombers have. She now lives at what used to be RAF Finningley. It's now called Robin Hood Airport, Doncaster, Sheffield. She was actually stationed there, this aircraft, between 1960 and 68. But she has her own hangar now, and you can go and visit her there. They have all sorts of visiting facilities there. And actually that facility will go on after she stops flying after this season. We also hope that she'll be able to continue to run her engines and be able to do fast taxiing on the runway there. So I think she's coming in now for her final pass, and we may be able to reflect a little of what happened in 1982, as I said, just over 33 years ago, when she dropped those 21 1,000-pound bombs on the Port Stanley airfield runway. We hope to be able to give you a little bit of a representation of that. Don't forget that when she has finished her flying display, you'll be very welcome at the club stand. Please do go and see them. Well, there we are. If you've enjoyed today's display and you'd like to help keep XH558 going, you could just get your mobile out now and send a text. Text the letters VULC155, so VULC 15 and 5, the other 5 is for the amount you're giving in pounds, and text that to 70070. So text the letters and figures VULC 155 to 70070. It'll cost you a £5 plus your standard text charge. All of the £5 goes to the Vulcan to the Sky Trust. Obviously you've got to have the permission of the person who pays the mobile bill. The Trust will acknowledge your gift, thank you very much, and ask if you want to gift aid it. Or you can just go to the website, vulcantothesky.org. I said I was going to tell you about the raffle that's available as a lovely, is that a hare going galloping by?
It's a deer.
Yeah, it's a deer.
Yeah. Oh, and there goes John Beatty about to track it down. That's where an amazing way to go deer stalking in a Chipmunk, isn't it? quite extraordinary. I've got to say, Sean, that was just magnificent. I've seen the Vulcan as much as you have, but every time is a real treat and a pleasure.
I know. Well, let me say to people that if you want to go and buy a raffle ticket at the club stand, the first prize is being in Vulcan with Martin Withers, the man who bombed the Falkland Islands, who's the chief pilot, and doing a fast taxi run. You get to be in the co-pilot's seat, and you get to take a guest with you who sits in one of the rear seats. Second is a Spitfire flight in formation with XH558. Third, a flight with the blades in formation, and they go on. Wonderful prizes for the summer raffle. Next year, she's going to be part of the Vulcan Aviation Academy and Heritage Centre at Doncaster in a new building where they're going to have the Etna project, which is a sort of like the Eden project, but for engineers. Mount Etna, as I'm sure you know, was the god Vulcan's workshop.
Indeed.
You probably knew that.
Yes. Superb. I mean, the tickets are available from your team here.
They are indeed.
Good. That's excellent news. Absolutely superb. Tragic that we may not see it, but let's enjoy it for this year.
For this year, indeed. And as the great Dr. Seuss said, the Cat in the Hat Man, the children's favourite Dr. Seuss, he said, "Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened."
How wonderful.
If you can't manage that, perhaps a little smile through the tears.
Yeah, I've just been asked to mention that you can, of course, see the the Vulcan again at Weston on the 21st of June, just a couple of weekends away. But I've littled out Cosford next weekend is probably the next outing.
She
I thought
will
it
be
might
at
be.
Cosford and also at Wellesbourne next weekend and at Cholmondeley Castle. By the way, Plains TV, who are doing the DVDs here, are doing a film all this year, which I think they're going to call Remembering the Vulcan.
Oh.
You can probably pre-order it with Plains TV.
Marvellously apt. And on that howling departure, I just loved it when all the car alarms went off. It happens everywhere, doesn't it? It was great. Well, we've had a bit of deer stalking as well. I see we've had a bit of a fire going on across the other side of the runway as well. But altogether now, first of all, to thank Sean Maffett for a really excellent presentation of what is truly an outstanding and iconic aircraft. And we hope we will savour that for the rest of this year, that is for sure. But now from the sublime to the other end of the absurd, and it's not absurd at all because it's a marvellous aircraft, and it's a Chipmunk. And this is what it really represents, generations and generations of young pilots taken to the sky, predominantly in the military, but many others in flying clubs as well. The de Havilland DHC-1 Chipmunk, very much the cornerstone of aviation through the post-war years. And getting airborne in it now, John Beatty himself, an equally vintage pilot, and he hates me saying that. But of course he is well known in the aviation community and a great charm and a really good character to have around as well. So he's just getting airborne right now in front of you. And I have to say, a very short takeoff too. So John there demonstrating his short takeoff technique. Which is excellent news. And whilst he's just repositioning, I don't know whether we need to do another quick update. No, I think Sam, our girl about town, is just coming absolutely exhausted from having been pounding around the site. Really terrific to see Throckmorton at capacity today. It's absolutely marvellous, and delighted you all made it in time, in the dry. Beautiful day to see the Vulcan as well. So as John repositions his aircraft just to come round, this now very sadly is filling in the slots that the Battle of Britain Memorial flight would have taken. Very regrettably, the wind strength and weather further north in the country not at all conducive to getting the old warbirds out of the hangar, and reluctantly they are unable to join us, which is very sad indeed. But John will do his best in what is a sort of pre-warbird training aircraft to a certain extent. Many people now going into the warbird world would get what we call tail dragger time on something like a Chipmunk, and then progress on to the Harvard before taking on the likes of the Spitfire, the Hurricane and the Mustang. So John now diving in. This is his own personal aircraft. I happened to be flying it myself just 3 weeks ago. I just needed a bit of tail dragger time myself as well, and took it for a spin around Yeovilton. Sporting little aircraft, got a few mods on it, not surprisingly, but very much one of the favourites in the old Royal Air Force inventory. This one you'll note is painted as a Portuguese example, though it never actually was a Portuguese airframe. But they built 76 of these airframes, imported de Havilland engines, and used them for many years as their military trainer as well. They still retain 6 or 7 of them, now running with Lycomings, but John bought this one in this paint scheme in 1998 and has enjoyed it ever since. He keeps it hangared at Yeovilton. He himself was the general manager of the Royal Navy Historic Flight for many years. And it's used to a certain extent for all the pilots there to keep currency on tailwheel aircraft. When he's not flying this, he's does his best to fly either the Seafire or the Skyrider of Kennett Aviation, and he's a rotary buff as well. He was instructor of both sides. He's an examiner for rotary aviation. And you'll see with a huge amount of experience like that, that's why he can get to fly the Chipmunk as gracefully. Not a huge amount of power, and so energy management is very much the cornerstone of this aircraft. A really graceful presentation that John is providing here in this Chipmunk. It really is superb, and I think we may have got him there just sort of doing a bit of a wing waggle index. So perfect timing there from our production manager, FCC, provider of PAs and everything else, doing 5 jobs here today. Trevor Graham, magnificently timed, Trevor. I don't know how you did that. That was quite superb. But I think this is John now manoeuvring for his downwind leg to land. Really a super chap, John. He seems to have been flying forever. He actually joined the Royal Navy in 1959, but he's flown just a huge number of things, all sorts of rotary, from the Chipmunk, the Hiller, the Whirlwind, went on to the Wessex 5, was a commando pilot in 1970, various helicopter jobs. He flew the Scout, the Wasp, the Gazelle, the Lynx, and the Sea King as well, and started flying his display work in 1973, initially with a Scout display, but was also involved with the Navy Sharks team in 1982 as well. So a huge amount of experience, really loved and enjoyed, and and look at this wonderful side slip. This is, you would think he was going to land on the left, wouldn't you? But he's actually going to land on the right. And this is typical of John, just side-slipping it all the way down the finals approach, very, very gently indeed, and just holding it on that headwind. And he'll put a bit of booter rudder in just a few seconds, and that will plop him down on the runway. Magnificent flying. He knows this aircraft really well, of course. He owns it and has been running it for years. And good, it's quite sprightly. Perfect. Well done, John Beatty in the Chipmunk. That was, yes, agreed, landing of the day. Quite fantastic. Although Peter Davis was pretty good in the gyro too. I don't know what you're thinking of. I suspect most of you say the Vulcans won the day. We were hugely impressed, however, with Peter Davis in the autogyro earlier on today. A really outstanding display. Now, in a few minutes' time, there may be a short gap. We are still hopeful of seeing the Great War display team. And that will take us back to a whole different era, 100 years ago, of course, of SE-5s and triplanes, Sopwiths and Fokkers and Junkers and Daredevils, and the development of aircraft from initially observation and reconnaissance to aerial dogfighting. And that hopefully will be with us in the next few minutes. So after that, we're going to go back into the training world looking at the Tutor, the current initial training aircraft of all 3 services. That'll be followed by the Bulldog, the wonderful and ever popular Breitling Wingwalkers at 4:10. Don't miss them. And then we'll finish off with a little bit of fun later in the afternoon as well. So it looks like John Beatty has quickly picked up his engineer, and he's hurtling into the sky, no doubt on his way back, I suspect, to Yeovilton. And hopefully he has a good trip back. You can see for miles today. Well, we're just getting an update. Not surprisingly, with the strength of the wind, the Great War team also unable to get airborne. Even more vulnerable aircraft than the Battle of Britain Memorial flight, which is going to condense the program a little bit, and I understand in the next few minutes we're going to get Andy Priest up in his Tutor, which is a super display. Well, just to bring you up to speed, we're just going to get a few aircraft out while we have a bit of a gap here, and Team Raven you see taxiing out. A really super aircraft they are, and they'll be followed by Peter Davis in the autogyro. So total of 7 aircraft to get out, and then we'll be moving on to Andy Priest in the tutor. Andy's parked down at Gloucester at the moment, and I think we've got a message down there to get him airborne a bit earlier. So just preparing for departure now, Peter Davis, just off in the distance, just left of the windsock. Again, he won't be needing much runway to get airborne in this wind. And a rather nice formation. We were just commenting on their excellent colour schemes of Team Raven. Yeah, a bit of a sporting farewell from Peter there. Really good news. Yes, just giving us another wing waggle and a wave. Brilliant. And just opening the throttles now. Team Raven kicking up a bit of dust. Well, an awful lot has been going on behind us, and we haven't had a moment to talk about all the detail of it. But amongst the static area, I know some fabulous old vehicles, vintage and classic cars from bygone days. And the marshallers here have decided that they would offer some awards to the people who brought their cars in today. And we've got some winners, which is great news. So I hope you're listening. We've got about a minute to go. I hear the tutor already coming on the air, which is great. Best Classic Club goes to the Cotswold Vale TR Club. So well done, the Cotswold Vale TR Club, for picking up the Best Classic Club. The Best Classic Vehicle has gone to an Austin K2. And also a County of Hereford fire appliance. Probably much the same thing, I suspect. The best classic car goes to the Volvo P1800 PC, the Saint. And indeed, very much a classic car for those of us who remember the Saint. But the best overall vehicle, the Dennis Pump Escape VRV 718J. If somebody would like to show me a photograph of that, I'd be fascinated to know what it actually is. But there we are, tremendous stuff. Well done, all you winners, and thank you so much for supporting Throckmorton. It's been an absolutely wonderful day, and we're just absolutely thrilled and delighted for Angus and Sam, who put so much effort into this. Well, a couple of minutes break now. We hear the tutor is on his way. I'm just bending my neck around to see if we can see it yet. So a few minutes to go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time of day to get back to the flying. And if you look straight ahead, you'll see a pair of strobe lights coming straight at you over the top of the windsock. And it is the tutor. This is the elementary flying training aircraft. And to tell you all about that, please welcome, I think you're a flying officer now, Andy Gilbert. Andy, welcome.
Thank you. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first RAF tutor display of 2015. Andy's running in towards you at over 200 miles an hour as he pitches up at 6G to start his display. He then climbs into the vertical until it looks like he's almost hovering before he pulls over the top. And then he turns back onto the crowd line while accelerating towards the ground. Born in Hereford, Andy joined the Air Force in 1991 as a navigator on the Tornado, before later retraining as a pilot. Flew the Tornado, Harrier and Domine before moving to 16 Squadron and flying the mighty Tutor. He isn't new to display flying, was display pilot in 2014 as well. The loop he's pulling into now is one of the first aerobatic maneuvers that new military pilots will learn in the Air Force. Up next is a half Cuban, rolls inverted and then pulls through for the second half of the loop. When not displaying, Andy's a qualified flying instructor with 16 Squadron at RAF Wittering, who along with 703 Naval Air Squadron, 674 Army Air Corps Squadron, and 57 Squadron are responsible for teaching and inspiring the next generation of RAF pilots. While the tutor itself may not defend the skies, EFT teaches the basic flying skills to all military pilots before they go on to more advanced aircraft. For example, the RAF Typhoon pilots conducting the Baltic Air Policing and Quick Reaction Alert in the UK that keeps Britain safe will have all started their flying career on the Grob tutor. And it's the same with the RAF's Chinook pilots, the Royal Navy's future F-35 pilots and the Army's Apache pilots. They all start their career on elementary flying training. As well as training UK pilots, EFT also takes many of our international partners as aspiring pilots, thanks to the RAF's world-class reputation. And starting this year, the tutor will also provide the first step in training remotely piloted aircraft system operators with a new specially designed course. I only finished EFT in February this year, so if there aren't any budding pilots out there who have any questions, then feel free to come and ask us. We will generally be wandering around or at the tutor display Range Rover.
If I could just add, Andy, as a multi-force pilot myself, that of course all three services use this aircraft, and I think they've got a few other recruiting teams as well, so hopefully they can talk to the Army. I don't know whether any Navy, have you seen any Navy recruiters?
I've not seen any here today.
No, just wondered, absolutely. But it is unique that this contract goes across all three services. I think first time that's been achieved since the Chipmunk days. And huge experience coming into play here, isn't there? I mean, and is a consummate professional and applying all the skills and consults people widely, doesn't he?
Yeah, he is indeed, and he's a very experienced display pilot as well. He did it last year too. He also did it in 2007 and 2008. And
yeah, I feel I've known him forever. So do most people actually in UK on the display circuit. Anyway, back to the flying. Over to you.
So these aerobatics that Andy is performing are all taught to elementary flying training students. If you're aged between 13 and 17 and fancy giving some of these a go, then there is the Air Cadet organisation. Every Air Cadet gets the opportunity to fly in the tutor at least once a year. As Andy kicks in the left rudder for a stall turn to the left. Then flies by inverted. At this point he'll be feeling negative 1G. He then pushes forward on the stick up to negative 3G. Any pilots among you will realise how uncomfortable Andy is during that manoeuvre. These aerobatics are a vital skill for all military pilots as they instill confidence in both the aircraft and the pilot's own ability. Andy is now repositioning for the first of two low passes at 100 feet. At this point he's accelerating to the aircraft's maximum speed as fast as he can get it to go. And if you missed him that time, he'll be coming around for another low pass. This time he'll drop a wing towards the crowd, so he will be able to see you and he will be waving. So he'd appreciate it if the crowd could wave back at him.
Yeah, it's just a great reminder here. Audience participation is required. It is a compulsory activity, and the pilots do love it, boys and girls, so do give them a wave. It's the only way they get to connect, that you're all watching them. So this is Andy Priest, and a really top guy. Well, very sadly, it's all over too quickly, and as I say, a really professional display there. Works very hard at his craft and knows this aircraft really, really well. And now the current trainer, and you will have seen one example of the earlier trainer in the Chipmunk, and we're going to see another one very shortly in the Bulldog. And very, very different construction, of course. The Bulldog, much stronger metallic aircraft as opposed to these composite materials that we're all used to these days. So tips on getting into the Air Force or the Army or the Navy as a pilot? Any recommendations, Andy?
Oh, try hard and follow your dreams. It's not always an easy process, but if you want to get there, you probably will.
Yeah, and I always just add to that, be yourself as well. You know, you just never know until you try, do you? And I think it's just so important that people actually put themselves forward. I was a very good example myself, actually. Didn't have a clue. I wasn't intending to be a pilot at all. I was going to go in a completely different world. And I just thought, I really fancy doing something different. And I thought, well, if I'm going to join the military, there's only one job I could possibly do in the military. And it is the cushiest, isn't it? Is being a pilot. No digging trenches, no throwing up on the back of a boat or in a submarine or something. It's just go to work in an armchair with lots of dials and buttons. Sorry, is that a bit simple? Yeah, well, look, I wish you all the best in your career.
Thank you.
I'm sure what you really want to fly is Typhoon.
Yes.
I thought it might be. It's every boy's dream. If you're thinking of joining the Army, it's Apache, and the Navy, I suspect, probably going to be F-35. It's all they're looking forward to. So now we're just, I hear engines starting up around me. Don't see much happening as yet, but what we're expecting to see is a Bulldog. And just a final farewell to Andy. Thanks for talking us through that.
Thank you very much.
Really good news, and have a great trip home. So there we are. We're getting now into the sort of final quarter of the afternoon, and it's been a real eclectic afternoon, real cross-section of different airframes we've had today. And but here in the commentary box, we're still pretty awestruck by Peter Davis's auto-gyro demonstration in what is really demanding and frisky wind here this afternoon. Now, I don't know whether they've managed to pull forward the timing of Rod Dean in his Bulldog. I suspect not. He's coming from Duxford. Let's listen in. Well, that's good news. I've just heard that he was in the area and on the air, so he's been called in early, which is fantastic news. And the Bulldog, as I mentioned there, the precursor, really, of the training world, a very popular aircraft, and something again that I still fly a little bit in my spare time. I love the solidity of the Bulldog, and you'll see it's equally as maneuverable as the Grob Tutor, just an entirely different age, more of a veteran trainer, and an entirely different composition as well. Originally designed by Beagle Aviation and built by Scottish Aviation Limited at Prestwick Airport. So we're just looking out in the sky now. I think his may be what we call a B-axis arrival as well. It comes at you out of the blue, and they're very, very difficult to see, these little aircraft. I wonder what I was heard. I gather that's the Griffon engine winding up in the arena behind me. And that is a serious machine. You saw one on the front end of the Rolls-Royce Spitfire earlier on. Magnificent beast. 37 litres, V12, 2,050 horsepower. Wow. Wouldn't you like to put that in your Nissan Micra over the course of the weekend? Be fantastic. Anyway, the Bulldog ordered in big numbers by various air forces as a basic trainer right across the world. The Swedish, the Malaysians, Kenyans, Nigerians, Jordan, Lebanon, Botswana. A whole number of different air forces use them as the basic trainer, and they were ordered as a Chipmunk replacement, over 130 of them brought into the University Air Squadrons and the Air Experience flights. And they remained in service with the Air Force until 2001, when the final ones were sold into civil ownership. So you still see quite a few of these flying around the UK, are often still in RAF colours, but no longer in military service. So we were craning our necks here, thinking he was a bit closer, but he's just caught up and said 3 minutes. And flying in his Rod Dean, a man I know very, very well, and most of us senior aviators in the country know of Rod's great exploits as a Royal Air Force jet display pilot himself. Still intimately involved with the air display world, and I think it's one of those things about aviation, it just keeps you young. And everybody just likes to keep flying as well. It's just fantastic stuff. Rod was very lucky. He spent most of his RAF service flying on operational squadrons, and principally flew the Hunter and the Jaguar, but also had time on the Jet Provost, the Meteor, the Gnat, and indeed the Chipmunk. He was the Strike Command Hunter display pilot at RAF Chivenor across in Devon in the very early 70s, and flew 50-odd public displays over 2 seasons, winning what was then called the WD and HO Wills Solo Jet Display Trophy at the North Weald International Air to 2 in 1972, a significant display that, because of course that was the very first international Air to 2, and we celebrated the 40th anniversary of that, and not surprisingly, a few years ago. So keep your eyes peeled. This particular aircraft was built in 1973 and was used by the Yorkshire University Air Squadron, based up at Royal Air Force Finningley and also at Church Fenton. It was bought and operated by Duxford-based Prop Shop Limited as part of John Remain's fleet from 2001 in the early days, and then subsequently bought by a syndicate of 3 other experienced pilots. It's been immaculately refurbished and is now finished in the East Midlands University Air Squadron colours. And we've got a 1-minute call now from Rod. And again, you'll see Rod put it through similar paces as Andy Priest, perhaps not quite so tight and certainly not pushing anywhere near the negative G that Andy Priest would be pushing. But all again about energy management. They don't have the power to climb ridiculously fast like that muscle biplane you saw earlier on. But so Rod tends to start his display reasonably high and then uses all the energy. And look at that now, it goes straight above the windsock, and you'll see one wing lamp, landing lamp on his, well, to you on the left-hand side. This is Rod Dean in the Scottish Aviation Prestwick-built Bulldog T1. Well, I hope you were enjoying that delightful music accompanying Rod Dean there. Yes, you're looking at a fully aerobatic side-by-side seat training aircraft here. 200 horsepower Lycoming on the front end. It's a flat 4 for those engineers out there who don't know what's on this one. Constant speed Hartzell two-bladed propeller. And a really nifty little aircraft. The visibility is good in it as well, and it's a great little touring aircraft, actually. It's something that I know I certainly enjoy flying. You can see now that he's a very competent pilot, and he's limited, if anything, just purely by the energy that he's got available in this particular aircraft. And you can see he gets lower and lower during the course of the display, and authorized actually down to a minimum height of 30 feet above the ground. Outside of his RAF career on jets and as a display pilot with them, he's flown a huge variety of other World War II aircraft. Mustang, Corsair, Wildcat, Sea Fury, Bearcat, Hurricane, Harvard, Skydiver, and of course, not surprisingly, he's got a few hours in the Spitfire as well. He's had a really marvellous career, probably outside of the Royal Air Force. Rod was also involved in CAA air display management as well for many years, and is now a key member of the British Air Display Association management team as well. Coming in on the 45 from the right-hand side, it's great to see so many people using different angles as well in displays rather than just going up and down. And as I say, he's been blessed really to live through some of the most, the most increasingly developed and dramatic changes in aviation from the post-war years right through to what we see in the main jets here, not necessarily perhaps around Throckmorton, but certainly on the airshow circuit. He used to lead a team of 5 Hunters on occasion, so he was also involved in the big wing of 19 Spitfires and Hurricanes at past displays at Duxford. As I mentioned, still doing it at weekends, and it's a great activity that definitely keeps you youthful, no doubt about that. The only thing you've got to practice is pulling the G. We were discussing that. It's amazing how your tolerance disappears very, very quickly if you don't do it frequently. And here is Rod certainly keeping in trim. Well, there you are, having got to the bottom of his display, having started relatively high and used up all the energy for aerobatic manoeuvres. Rod now coming round in his final pass of the afternoon. He'll be going straight back to Duxford after this. So, boys and girls, mums and dads, you know the drill, don't you? Last pass, he'll be waving at you. He'll no doubt give you a bit of a topside view into the cockpit as well. And please give him a warm farewell and a wave and a hug from everybody here at Throckmorton. There we go, that's Rod Dean in the Bulldog. So a few minutes now, the wing walkers that I know you'll love and enjoy, due on slot at 10 past the hour. If we hear them on the airwaves, we'll no doubt call them in a little bit earlier. But no doubt a few more activities going on in the arena before we close this afternoon. We've heard the growl of the Griffon engine, so it could be back to the dogs, or it may even be the vintage lancing again. I simply don't know, but plenty on offer there. The Midlands Air Ambulance, of course, still running their own little booth and tent on the site here. Do please support them. One of many charities that both Angus and Sam are keen to help, in addition to combat stress and fly to help, and indeed both the Royal Air Force Association and Cancer Research. Well, we hear that the wing walkers are just about 2 or 3 minutes out, so they'll be with us a little early, which is good news, and something to be really inspired, and great joy to watch them, because this takes us back to the interwar years when men were men and girls did it on top. And in this case, they're flying on the top wing of a Stearman biplane, and they are just utterly gorgeous. And that's both the girls and the aircraft combined. It is a tremendous story, the whole story of the aerobatics stable run by Vic Norman. Keep your eyes now up high onto the left-hand side, and please welcome the rip-roaring, barnstorming team, the Breitling Wingwalkers. Now keep your eyes peeled on what the girls are doing, because they don't just stay in one position, they go upside down, inside out. You've got to look at the maneuvers they're doing, and they're stretching, and just look at the athleticism of the girls on top. And we're joined today by Freya Patterson and Emily Gilding. In the cockpits today, we've got Dave Barrell, who's leading, and Martin Carrington, both of them hugely experienced on these aircraft, and they've been flying all around the world during the winter, as well as now about to start a full season in the UK. Yes, they're on little swivel joints, those girls, and they will go upside down, and later on, let's hope the wind is not too frisky with them, they will actually get out of those harnesses and walk the wings. Stand by now as they come back into crowd center. They will be splitting, and look, yes, they are actually upside down. Yes, they're both turning and upside down on cue. These girls and music synergy combined. Let's look at the beautiful color schemes of the Breitling aircraft. Now those rip-roaring sounds you hear, that's from the mighty Pratt & Whitney engine, 450 horsepower. And when the props go fully fine, fully forward, then the tips go supersonic, and then you get this fantastic roar. Yeah, so talking in harmony now, we hopefully see a mirror later on. You never know, they have been known to even touch hands as one of them goes upside down. But they will be putting as many maneuvers, they'll go uppity up, up, and down through the entire performance. And look at that now. That's hard enough to do in a gymnasium, let alone on the top of an aircraft at 150 miles an hour. Now, if you're listening on his scanners, there's Dave Barrell there leading there. It's a terrific guy. He gained his pilot's license in 1995 and has been leading the team for some while. Although Martin, who's actually on his wing most of the time during the display, is actually the director of flying at Aerobatics in Renkham, a beautiful airfield if you're ever passing it, and dedicated also to the Royal Flying Car, it being one of the original RFC airfields. You can see now as they pull up in harness, and really working hard there against the drift, and they're pushing over the top, and whilst the girls are upside down, the boys are pulling G in the reverse direction to the girls. Now, they're so busy during the winter, mainly flying on behalf of Breitling. They were at the Bangalore Airshow in India not too long ago. They've also been in China and the rest of the Middle East. But in his spare time, Dave used to run a garage and is really happy when he's tinkering with engines, and was just the man to get an MOT. So if you had a dodgy motor, he was the man to go to. But I think he's just pretty pressed these days. Team itself has several more of these aircraft, and you will occasionally see a four-ship formation. The girls now, keep your eyes peeled. Look, they're lying on their sides. This is happening for real. They're not imposters, they're not models. They are just incredibly brave and courageous young girls. Now, Freya's had an interesting time. She always had a bit of a passion for this, but was actually a gymnast before, and she worked at Disneyland in Paris, and she spent a lot of her time dressing up as the princesses and also Winnie the Pooh. On the other top of the other wing is Emily Gilding. She's actually Stella's sister. You may well have seen Stella flying for the last couple of years, but Stella's been in the team since 2009. But this is just the second season for Emily, and of course it was watching her sister that really inspired her to have a go as well. Actually a geography graduate and works for an environmental consultancy. And I guess very happy to see the smoke here because yet again they're using the best environmentally friendly smoke that is available, the well-known Ondina. Now I reckon there may be a bit of a split coming up, so let's listen in. Get your cameras ready, the girls ready, the pilots ready, they're coming straight towards you. Let's wait and see. And really remarkable, death-defying but precision flying from Dave and Martin there. Absolutely joined at the hip. These two guys have been practicing this routine for many, many years and doing it incredibly well. Again, you can see demanding very, very bumpy flying. We're just talking to one of the pilots who came back and said that formation flying really hard today because the aircraft just bouncing around in the sky. But of course, this all going back to the barnstorming days. Well, what happened? Well, after the First World War and before the Second World, a lot of aircraft, they were all being sold off cheaply. What was the way to entertain people? Well, the guys just flew into whatever village it was in the Midwest and just said, well, come on, girls, do you want to have some fun? Come riding with me. Yes, the barnstorming guys, at the end of the day, nowhere to stay. They ended up in all the farmers' barns. The original Stearmans had relatively low-powered 220 horsepower engines, but again, they're fitting with these Pratt & Whitney Wasps really made a difference, as indeed the additional control services with ailerons on both wings makes them an awful lot more maneuverable than the standard Stearman. And in these colours here, now I think another good crossover maneuver coming up. Stand by with your cameras. Oh, absolutely magnificent stuff. Both times, both boys now reversing their maneuvers, coming back in. They'll be looking back over their shoulders so that they get their positioning absolutely right. So here we go now, a head-to-head pass. They'll be looking very, very close indeed, very difficult, concentrating very, very hard. The girls completely in all there, not at all concerned. That was close. Woo. So you know the score, boys and girls. You'll see them waving at you. When you get the chance, do give them a wave back. They really appreciate it. I know I talk to them all the time, both the pilots and the girls doing this. Coming back in now towards you. We're no doubt going for another crossover maneuver. Let's listen in and see what comes up. Dave Barrow's voice you hear there leading. The only time Martin takes lead is when they go for the mirror pass, but they're forming back in now. We hopefully will get a few more maneuvers from them, and with any luck, if we keep your eyes peeled, we hope that the girls will be able to get out of the harnesses and do some real wing walking on the top of the wings. Oh, you have to feel that to really appreciate what they're doing up there. Yeah, extraordinary maneuvers, those stretches, bad enough in your sitting room, let alone a gymnasium. But on the top of a wing, literally about 100 to 150 mile an hour winds right in their faces. And the girls making it look really easy. So here we come now back into a pairs formation figure. This is when they start thinking about doing a few more rolls, maybe loop as well. Let's wait and see. They're gaining height. Keep your eyes close on. They'll come down into what looks like a roller coaster maneuver, and we won't know till they call it whether they're going to roll or loop. The girls will go upside down as well, hanging on to their harnesses, just like a 5-point harness, and they're pushing down, all the blood going to their heads now. And are they pulling up? Are they going to loop it? Are they going to roll? Oh, and they're rolling, isn't that just superb? Well, don't forget to give them a wave now as they're going past. They'll be repositioning this time. We'll keep our fingers crossed and see whether they decide to go for the mirror maneuver. Bringing all the romance and glamour of those interwar years back. A really superb, stable aircraft, a mainstream trainer, of course, the Stearman, essentially what it was primarily used for, but a great little touring aircraft as well. Now, it's a good time to keep your eyes peeled, particularly on the girls, just to see what. Now, I think they actually have come out partly of the harness and they're sat on the forward leading edge of the airframes as if they're on the Titanic. Absolutely extraordinary. Look at that. And you could see there how Emily was struggling, not just to sort of point her hand forward, but all the bumping in the aircraft as well. So just giving you a real feel just what they're fighting against up there. So having maneuvered, and this is happening for real, there are no tricks here. These girls are maneuvering around the top of the wing. Having done that viewpoint over the horizon maneuver there on the leading edge, they're now repositioned on the trailing edge. That's the rear part of the wing. Sitting on that over the top of where the pilots are sat in the rear seat. Big wave, boys and girls, mums and dads, whatever you got, hats, coats, umbrellas, ice creams, give them a huge wave. This is the Breitling Wingwalkers. Well, brilliant, because they're going back to Rencombe. The girls have got back in the cockpit. This is the very last pass now. Great opportunity for show your appreciation for the Breitling Wingwalkers. That is Dave and Freya. Well done, guys. And coming up behind now, Martin and Emily. A well-earned rest back at base. That would have been very hard work. There's a long time to spend on the top of the wing for those girls, having had to get up there, of course, a little earlier on before the display. And are really superb. Don't they just look magnificent against this wonderful blue Throckmorton sky? Here goes then Martin and Emily. Well done, guys. Superb work. Thoroughly enjoyable. Woo-wee. Well, we hope you liked that. I think we did, didn't we? Or was it just me? No, it can't possibly have been. Okay, well, we're nearly at the tail end of what has been a magnificent afternoon at Throckmorton. 2 more acts to go. We've got John Scott in his Moodry Cap 10, and then the crazy, slightly bonkers Brendan O'Brien in his Piper Cup. So I think we've just got a couple of minutes now whilst we wind up the next aircraft. And First of all, thank you all very much for coming. If you're thinking of tootling off in the next few minutes, we just want to appreciate your support, and we're really thrilled and delighted for Angus and Sam seeing so many people here today. A sellout show, and absolutely delighted. And of course, you've all done a huge amount of good for all the charities that are being supported here today. You see a Griffin helicopter there just reversing out of its parking slot. And I suggest you make the most of the afternoon. I suspect there may be a bit of a jam coming out. Yeah, well, as I suspected, I gather there is a bit of a rush to the exits at the moment, so I suggest you don't add to that rush. Just enjoy the rest of the day. Talk to all the participants around the static site. We've got an awful lot of the military here today. I see there's an Army Air Corps helicopter on the ground as well. They can tell you about flying in the Army Air Corps in addition to those from the Royal Air Force here today. And the Griffin helicopter just deciding to give us a flyby as well. This comes from the Defence Helicopter Flying School at Royal Air Force Shawbury up in Shropshire. And that is part of the Advanced Rotary Programme, and also the Central Flying School helicopter instructors and examiners will be operating those here today. We will do our best on behalf of the management to get you away as rapidly as possible, but you will appreciate being an absolutely packed show today, that nobody will be going anywhere in a rush. So please bear with all the marshallers and the police and the stewards, and do give them a smile. Thank you, sir. Very nice to see you. Hope you're having a nice day. And as I say, plenty more things around the site this afternoon. Nice to see people smiling at Throckmorton. Absolutely marvellous. We've had some terrible days here in the last few years when it's just thrashed with rain. So welcome back, the Great British Summer. So keep your eyes high in the sky, and please welcome John Scott. An interesting aircraft, the Cap 10, first built in 1970, not this particular one, and is still was in production right up until 2007. It was developed from the PL Super Émeraude and was born as the CP100 before its name changed to the Cap 10 under the Construction Aéronautique Parisienne. Hence the cap. Hands a very capable aviator, John Scott, who I noticed had his aircraft advertised for sale a little earlier in the year. I'm not sure whether it still is, but it's jolly good value. He reckons only got 5,700 hours on the airframe, and had a full refurb not long ago. But anyway, very, very different aircraft from the ones you've been perhaps looking at earlier on today. The name of the designer was, not surprisingly, Moudry, hence the Moudry Cap 10, and was built in Bernay, France. Prototype of this aircraft first flew in 1968. Holding it on the
propeller there, and the engine running out of power to the airspeed's almost off, and then we just put in a big boot of rudder to get that effect. So you heard us talking about stall turns through the course of the afternoon. Again, working in quite a tight little box. Keeps the display, this aircraft able to operate in a very small envelope, as we call it in aviation terms. And you can see a delightful aircraft to do aerobatics or to go touring in with excellent visibility from the big cockpit bubble. Just holding it momentarily at the top there before pulling through. Over and above there, what looks like a little swallow doing its very best to make about 10 yards in the 30-knot winds. Not the easiest thing to do. Pushing hard there, is he pushing up against that's a very unpleasant manoeuvre, very similar to Andy Priest there, to probably 3G minus 3G, and so all the blood rushing to his head, now diving at the ground. Much more comfortable position to be in, believe it or not. Just holding it as a, yes, doing a sort of knife roll at the top there. Absolutely superb. Just holding it in the knife edge position at the top. Absolutely magnificent. Excellent, a very well established training aircraft aerobatics, the Cap 10. And you can see why. It's very stable. It probably, you know, not too much in the way of vices, and not overpowered. Still able to do the odd tumble. Marvellous. Very gentle and graceful performance this. You'll see him making really good use of the odd 45-degree angles as well. So calling the changes, going now through a slow roll. Again, requires a lot of coordination to keep it going in a straight line down the display line this. Most pilots make it look incredibly straightforward, but I can assure you it isn't. It takes quite a lot of practice to get that maneuver right. Neat knife edge there, giving you a good topside view. He will have been just having a good look at all you down there, just to check that you're still around and paying attention. Keeping a lot of height. Again, you heard Greg talking, or was it Bob, I think, Bobski, talking about exchanging speed for height, and an essential necessity for all pilots conducting aerobatic displays. Now, I'm not sure whether he's coming in. He looks as though that is complete. I haven't heard him call at all in the last few minutes, but I'm sure somebody else has been talking to him. But that was John Scott. and very nicely and elegantly flown, although I do see him turning back in again, but I suspect he maybe is en route somewhere else. It looks like, according to the schedule, maybe off to Bidford, and I know that's where a lot of pilots heading for fuel, so that just leaves us one more aircraft to finish off the afternoon. But it's a very different aircraft. If you look, let's see, to that mound of mud in the centre of the airfield over there, it's a very scruffy stuff where the smoke was earlier on. You'll see a little aircraft, and that's called a Piper Cub. And this is going to be quite different. We're not quite sure what he's going to do. Brendan O'Brien is well known for running a thing called O'Brien's Flying Circus. Yeah, he's the man that lands this aircraft on the top of a moving truck. He also does a lot of fireworks at night with this aircraft as well. But he says today he's going to have a go at limbo dancing. He's going to have a go at picking up ribbons off the ground. He's going to be doing toilet roll bombing, and who knows what else. He's a very gifted, able, and a hugely experienced aviator. Used to run his own television show on Discovery as well. You may well have caught that in past years. He is a character of some distinction. We're just waiting now for him to be given his clearance to get airborne, and this will be the finale of the day. So, with a call sign like Crazy One, expect anything from this chap. And rip-roaring, I doubt that he'll need much of this runway to get airborne. And it will go mad from the first moment. Very popular aircraft, thousands of them built. Almost 20,000 of them to be truthful. And there we go, didn't need much of a runway at all. And a really popular touring aircraft as well. This one a bit specialized, and it's got a clipped wing, taken about 4 feet out of the span, and you can see all sorts of knobs and bolts and things on it. Much of that is to do with his pyrotechnic show, but the rest of it I'll leave to your imagination. Well, the first thing we see him doing is practicing his hover flying. The wind is so strong that, of course, he doesn't get an awful lot of forward speed. But you see the limbo pole is going up already. So he'll be just checking that out. And yes, this is going to happen, we think. He's going to do several different things. And we understand they're all honestly planned. Oh dear, I see the taper's broken again, which is a bit frustrating. Such is the strength of the wind. But he's an extraordinary character. His ancestry is Irish, goes back to the 17th century with the Huguenot immigration from France into Ireland and the UK. Although he spent most of his formative years as a young man in London. He is a raconteur of the first order, and if you have half a day to spare, you will find Brendan very interesting company, because he has the most extraordinary collection of worldwide travelling and experience stories. He is, however, also a well-known twitcher, and that he loves watching birds, and is very passionate about all things to do with flying. Got over 13,000 hours in his logbook and has flown in excess of 300 different types. Just going across his toilet roll, you'll see there, no parachutist this time. And he, yes, chops the second one. Absolutely superb. He's got a remarkable 200 world aviation records, ratified by the FIA. And he's also a CAA display authorization holder and examiner and a test pilot. So he's just about been there, done it, experienced it, crashed it as well, and spent a lot of time talking about it. So here we come in now, low, look at the limbo rope. Will he do it? Will he do it? My goodness, he's so low, and yes, fantastic. A first success for Brendan here today. Absolutely superb. He's also a parachutist. When he gets bored flying, he takes into something else. He's a keen mountaineer and naturalist. And he likes to bring the showmanship back into air displays, and you can see this is it. So not content with doing it from the left, he's now going to do it from the right. You need to get up close and personal to the fly line here to get a good photograph of this. And you, oh my word, you can see the crosswind is throwing him all over the place. Oh my goodness, has he lost control? I don't know. He's going to do it. He's going to do it again. Stand by, everybody. Here we go for the next limbo. He didn't quite. He's cut it. Fantastic. Knowing Brendan, I suspect he just dropped his spectacles in the cockpit floor there somewhere and just took his eye off the ball he was coming through. Probably had the stick between his knees and his hands rubbing something else, I don't know, but there we are. Yeah, as planned, we were just joking in the commentary box here. This is the streamer run. Yeah, we're told that everything is immaculately well planned in this. I bet you not. But here is, I hope he's not going to take out, oh, he's going to pick up the streamers, I think, on the next one now. Having cut one and carried that around, I think what the boys on the ground are trying to prepare now is what was meant to be his pick up a streamer run. But there we go. Yeah. Many years ago, he also led a Fournier RF4 duo. He used to do that to Pink Floyd's music, and worked alongside John Taylor, a very well-known UK aerobatic display pilot and aerobatic training pilot as well. Here we go. We're ready to go. We're running in. The pyro's ready. Are we going under? Are we going to collect the streamer for the other wing? Let's see. Oh, neatly done. And I have to say, in this sort of wind, very, very bumpy, a lot of turbulence coming off all the buildings around here. That is very, very good flying indeed. So we're going to do it all over again from the left, coming in very, very low indeed. You can see him very clearly there in the cutaway cockpit. There we go for another run. So coming in again, this is the crazy one, Brendan O'Brien.
And he's picked up oh, no, he just missed it. But I'm sure it was planned. Believe it or not. A hugely colourful character. And just glorious paint scheme he's got on his very heavily modified Piper Cub. He's also a well-known commentator on the circuit as well. You'll hear him at other air shows when he's not flying. Coming in yet again. Oh, it's bumpy. Look how turbulent it is. Oh, and he cuts it. Well, I'm told he's perfectly in control, but I must admit this is pretty exciting flying going on here at the moment. Sideways slipping all the way up and down. It just goes to show actually what a manoeuvrable aircraft the Piper Cub is and how relatively safe in all sorts of operating conditions. Well, we hope you enjoyed that, particularly boys and girls out there amongst you. Please don't practice this at home. But if you get the chance to meet Brendan, do have a chat with him. You'll laugh your socks off. This is his final run of the afternoon, and I regret to say, I think the final aircraft display act of the afternoon as well. So from the left-hand side, please give a huge wave and a thank you to Brendan O'Brien, crazy one of O'Brien's Flying Circus. Yep, and you can see him hanging out of the cockpit there. Yes, giving you all a wave as well. A real showman, a legend in his own lifetime, Brendan O'Brien. Absolutely outstanding. And that is him now complete for the afternoon. That is the Throckmorton Airshow also complete for the afternoon. As I say, there will be a bit of a rush, so I suggest you just pace your time on departing. Take a walk around the site, get yourself a cup of tea, have a sandwich. We've really enjoyed having you here this afternoon. We do hope you'll come back. It's been an absolutely outstanding afternoon, beautiful weather. We can only say apologies for those aircraft that didn't make it, but very, very demanding circumstances. Had some fantastic highlights from the extremes of Peter Davis in the autogyro right through to the mighty Vulcan. It has been superb. You've all done a tremendous amount already just by being here to support the charities. We thank you so much. Please, please come back next year.
And that brings to an end this dip into the Plains TV archive. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and do make sure to like the page on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube for more of these. And also go check out the PTV On Demand service that gives access to hundreds of hours of our aviation and airshow content. That's over at watch.plainstv.com. Thanks again for tuning in. See you again.